All right, welcome back to the Only Fantasy Basketball Podcast, your source for explicit and uncensored fantasy basketball content. And my God, have we been through a journey since we last provided you with a podcast to listen to? We've had COVID, we've had technical issues, all sorts of technical issues. We've had, work commitments and all the normal kind of stuff, but that's just the way it goes. So, look, we're missing an absolutely outstanding game of footy to record this for you, so we're probably going to take it kind of fast and chug through it.
Nice.
let's start with Shan. You are basically now all but guaranteed the Geelong Fantasy Ballers championship for the season. Surely you're feeling confident now. You can't. I mean, there's no way you can lose it from here. You're like 7 points ahead, and there are like 5 games left or something.
It's not 7 points ahead, is it? I feel like you made some ground on me today.
Oh, I might not have. I'm not.
Yeah,
how many the latest was numbers.
It? 2 days worth of games left. So
yeah, no, you're right. 7 points ahead. So yeah, each team's got 2 games left. So
and it's not. It's more than that as well, because you look at where the points are likely to sort of rise and fall, and there's no chance. There's no hope.
You win by 10.
I can't get to any more than 62 points, and I don't think you're going to lose any more than like 1 or 2, maybe.
Yeah, look, I could have a disaster and lose like 3.5, but you'd have to have a similarly amazing game.
It wouldn't happen.
3.5.
I think the only thing I could do is I don't know. No, it's impossible. I am behind you in 2 categories, but I'm too far behind you to realistically catch in threes and points, and it's just not going to happen. Anyway,
I don't like to get cocky, but yeah.
It's done.
What do we got? 4 days left?
It's something like that. Yeah. All right.
I'll get smug come Sunday. Let's go Sunday. So 2 days.
Well, let's use this to lead into the first topic of conversation: successes and failures of your fantasy basketball season. Shan, lead us off as the champion in waiting.
Okay. Look, I feel like if I was to survey the players in our league as to why I'm winning this year, I'm pretty sure they'd all point towards some pretty schmick trading that has really put me right at the top of the standings. But let's put that aside for a second.
Well, I wouldn't put that as the number one thing. Drafting Larry Markkinen.
Thank you. Yeah. I would point to guys like Larry Markkinen, Kristaps Porzingis. I would point to Damian Lillard, who I got for like a late second round sort of value for Lillard, who's been ranked 7. What else would I point to? I would point to Luka Doncic. So he's ranked 16, and yes, I probably paid about 6th most sort of price for Luka Doncic, but even that, 10 spots lower, that's the best sort of return on investment Luka's had in a fantasy league for a long time. Usually he ranks sort of 20s sort of range, so that's a solid enough pick. I was pretty happy with that outcome.
Would you not also say that in the sort of composition of your team that Luka's played an important role? He's just had those volume stats across the board, really, like the big.
Absolutely, yeah. So that was the gamble I was taking. I was willing to pay a certain amount of money for him, knowing he would never approach finishing the season, say 5th or 6th. So that wasn't the goal. It was if a guy who gets you those Christmas tree stats, the points, rebounds, and assists, if a guy who gets you those in such volume ends up 10 picks close to what you paid for him, that's a win. It's a bit the same with a guy like Trey Young or something who hasn't been great, but it's that sort of gamble, and it's worked.
Yeah.
Probably the last one I'd mentioned before I let you all. Well, you already mentioned Jaren was an absolute bloody. That was a miracle trade. I understood the trade from both sides when it happened, but Jesus Christ, it's worked out well for me. But the other guy I'll bring up would be the boy that you mentioned in several of our early podcasts, Dave, Jalen Williams.
Yeah, my God.
When I look back over the last 40 games, so the last 3 months, half of a season, he's been ranked 40. So just think about that. Where's he going to go next year?
To the bank.
Probably about pick 40, maybe a little bit earlier than that, which is an amazing sort of pickup.
This is a bit of a tangent, but it's interesting to see with all of the extra opportunity in this kind of chaos-filled final couple of weeks that there are guys like Shaden Sharp who's just started to flash his potential. And it's been interesting to me to see people talking about how Shaden Sharp could potentially be the best player from this rookie class, or has the potential to be. And I just feel as though Jalen Williams has really flown under the radar this entire season. Like he's had no talk for Rookie of the Year that I've seen at all.
Oh, I'm seeing him sort of mentioned typically about somewhere within the second to fourth sort of best in this year's rookie class. And I think probably second or third's probably a fair evaluation, but just thoroughly impressive.
It's just got that full package, but nothing super flashy, so he doesn't kind of make the highlight reels. And, you know, in this day and age of everybody following the NBA on Twitter, that doesn't really get the, you know.
But to bring back to your point about Shaden Sharp, I was thinking about him the other day, the sort of value he'll go into next year, and I think a lot of it will depend on what the Blazers decide to do. They could blow it up and move Dame, which I think would be a really sensible thing for them to do, and go Shaden Sharp, and who's the other guard there, the shooting guard? Oh, his name
Simons. Anthony Simons.
Anthony Simons. I could see those two getting a hell of a lot of usage if Dame gets moved.
Yeah, I mean, this might be a conversation for another segment, but they've got the fourth highest, I think, odds of getting the number one pick, and it's actually not significantly lower than the top three. They're like the top three are like 12 point something %, and the Blazers are like 10 point something. So they've almost got as good a chance as any team of getting Wemby. And like I'd feel pretty sad for Dame if he got shipped out of that team when they landed Wemby. Like I think obviously he's only got you could see it both ways, right? You could rebuild around Wembanyama and get like a nice little package for Dame. And if you're looking at what's best for the future of the team, that might be it. But you could also think that, you know, maybe Wemby's going to be good enough early enough, like a Tim Duncan was, that it'll give Damian Lillard an opportunity to make a real run at it, a run at contending late in his career.
Sure, definitely not a guarantee that Portland will get rid of him. The loyalty he's shown that franchise, I'm sure they would be keen to sort of repay that, and they're not going to be the ones forcing the issue. I think it would be more so if Dame finally thinks maybe that's the move for me. At that point, they would do
perhaps. Yep, I could see that. Nicko, do you want to give us your rundown, successes and failures?
Look, I've probably got more failures than successes. I started
you had a mid-level season, right? You're in the
and I had to take some chances because I wasn't quite up there, and I took some chances and they didn't necessarily pay off. The clear success for me was paying big dollars to get Jokic. Mm-hmm. He was great. Can't complain with Nikola. Ant-Man was pretty good. A lot of people kind of, you know, raised an eyebrow. Look, he pretty much, I thought he'd go a little bit better than he did, but I can't complain with his efforts. Trae Young was a little bit off the boil for me. Tyler Herro, I was really happy with at the start of the season, but he really died in the ass later on in the season. Similar thing with Christian Wood. When he got that injury, he was just really starting to come on mid-year, and he never really got back. Also coincides with the male succubus coming over to his club and just draining all the power from all the good athletes there.
Yeah, my God. Kyrie.
So, look, I don't usually like to blame Kyrie for a lot, but when I do, it's for my other fantasy impacted players.
Yeah, fair enough.
Paolo Banchero, paid for him. Sorry, go Shan.
Nicko, did you mention in this little ramble Miles Turner? It's got to be a huge success for you this year.
Yeah. He's on my list. He's about to come up. I was saving him for last.
My bad.
But yeah, Paolo Banchero, I probably got a little bit too hopeful. Banchero, tomato. Paolo's been all right. Paulo Banchero is being great at times. I think he's one of those guys who's probably going to be fun to actually watch rather than own on a fantasy side, at least for the first couple of seasons of his career, until he kind of finds his niche and starts really just commanding more possessions and more usage. So look, he's there too. Toby Harris, I was happy with him. I didn't expect a lot going in, and he provided some pretty solid, consistent, reliable stats, which allowed me to maintain a reach for a certain point until I had to take a few too many risks. And yeah, Miles Turner, finally played a bunch of games this year, and started playing really well. Got to be happy with Miles Turner. I think I'd happily draft him again after this season.
Yeah.
There's a few people who I'll probably be wary of. Trae Young's probably right up the top of the ones that I'd be wary of. Yeah.
Expand on that, Nicko. Why would you be wary of him? What's someone having owned him this year? What are the things that you're concerned about?
I'm just not sure. Now maybe it's because of the situation at Atlanta with getting DJ in there at playing the same role as him. They do kind of complement each other a little bit, but I just feel like he put up some pretty filthy games throughout the season, but he didn't have that consistency. It didn't really feel like it was his team, like it potentially should have been. Yeah, so I'd be a little bit gun shy on him. Look, I think most people, depending on what kind of draft they do, when they get to the stage, they're like, oh shit, I need a point guard. Dame Lillard's gone, a few LaMelo Ball may be gone, and you really do have to consider Trae Young regardless, because he's not top tier, but he has potential to be top tier. So I'd probably dare say I'll miss out on him next year, but I'm not writing him off completely. If he were to be traded somewhere, hey, I'm back on board.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
All right, look, I'll go through mine quickly. There's not a lot to say. Unfortunately, I've had a relatively boring season. I think I drafted decently well. Like the guys that I took up with big money, I thought paid off pretty well. But then I didn't get any kind of surprise breakouts from my later, cheaper picks, which I think often drives a successful season. So, and it was tough for me because, I think whenever you finish second, you kind of you want to analyze it and look back on whether you failed to take some kind of decisive opportunity during the season that could have pushed you over the edge. For me, it was tough because I started off like a house on fire and I was ahead by quite a substantial margin for a long time. And then I got
Tatum and Shea early for you was huge.
Yeah, and I got hit by the injury bug, and then I was kind of waiting for my guys to get back from injury, and I was sliding down the table. I'm like, look, am I still good enough to win this league when I get all my guys healthy again? And I wasn't. I didn't know, and so it was difficult because by the time they all got back on court, I was kind of stuck with the team that I had, and it was a little bit late to swing a big deal to make a substantial change to the trajectory of my season. So, yeah, I don't know. I kind of got stuck with a bunch of guys at the end of my roster that were just borderline playable, like Jabari Smith. And I think in hindsight, perhaps I should have just cut bait on those earlier in the season and swung for a Jalen Williams like Shan got. He was obviously the guy that I would have picked up if I'd cut Jabari. In hindsight, that was a poor decision by me. But yeah, there you go.
I can comment on that because that's a dilemma that faces me every season. You guys will know me that I get antsy. I have to make free agent acquisitions every second day, otherwise I start getting the shakes, and that's evident. Yes. And when we look at the amount of moves of the teams in our league, there's only one other team that has at least half of the moves that I've had this year. So right. I'm making moves constantly, and I hate being in that position where my worst two guys are guys you just can't drop, but you kind of
that's fair.
They're not exciting. So I make lots of mistakes with the guys I drop. Or I make lots of mistakes, but I get a lot of wins too. So
yeah, I think in analysing it, that'll be the big takeaway for me, that I need to make more decisive free agent moves earlier in the season.
How did you enjoy Mikal Bridges, David?
Oh yeah,
Mikal. He was brilliant in the second half of the season post trade, wasn't he? I don't know. He was surprisingly not as highly ranked as you might think. I don't know that his ranking in Brooklyn versus his ranking in Phoenix would be substantially different, even though we had the huge spike in points. He just lost a lot of efficiency. He was lots of games with huge field goal attempts and under 40% shooting from the field. Turnovers would have risen
significantly, I imagine.
Turnovers weren't awful, but it was...
To add some context, he's ranked 30 for the season.
Yep.
37 for the last month, 21 the last 2 months, 18 the last 3 months.
There you go. Yeah. Okay. So look, as I say, it was mostly, the downside was mostly kind of good, huge field goal attempt games, and often shooting below 40% from the field. So you get the plus from the points, and you get the minus from the field goal percentage hit, and it's just the way it is. And it was a bit of a hit because at one point I was hoping to be able to track down Nicko in field goal percentage, and then that just went by the way. Was what it was. All right. Anything else to say, guys? I mean, we're going to have a proper kind of like roundup of the season in a couple of weeks once it's all over.
Last year, the previous season, I felt like I had a really good chance, and Zion basically just ripped my heart out.
Yeah.
And I did have a significant amount of injuries last year, and I think everyone, well, not everyone, but most people kind of do have a bit of a talk about injuries when it happens to them. This year, my team, relatively healthy, just didn't make the decisions in the right times.
Yep.
And the ones that I did make a call on early didn't pay off as much as I needed them to. So I just got to wear that one and go back to the drawing board for next season.
Any last thoughts, Shan?
Oh yeah, I'll say it does look like I'm having a good year, but I think it's my typical philosophy has played out well for me this year, and that's just to take a bunch of risky guys, and it means you're going to have a competitive year, and then you're going to have 2 or 3 uncompetitive years, and those years suck.
Yeah.
And this year for me, it was guys like Kristaps, Zion, who I managed to trade away at the right time, and who's the third guy? Triple J. Yeah.
Yep.
So take risks. It's the way to sort of compete occasionally.
My general philosophy as well in auction is to not take enormous risks with big money players, and then to do the Hail Marys on your cheaper guys, mid cost to cheaper guys. And I think, go.
Think about those 3 players that I just mentioned. They weren't sort of top 2 or maybe even 3 round guys.
No.
I mean, maybe Kristaps was borderline 3rd round sort of guy, but they're all probably that 3rd round sort of level is where I was taking risks. So I wanted to have 2 or 3 solid picks. Didn't end up that way. I actually lost Cade Cunningham, who was my second or third best player for the season. That sucked. But you're right. Don't take those risks in the first round.
You can't win them all, Shan.
Oh, look, I think evidence of the strength of your season, Shan, is that you did have. I mean, you had some pretty bad injuries to try and overcome throughout the course of the season, and they were occurring at regular intervals, and yet, I mean, you still won fairly comfortably. So there you go.
You're a good man, Dave. If I actually don't hold on to this will be a hilarious episode.
This is going to be gold.
I mean, that's not going to happen. All right, let's move on. Let's try and whip through this. Topic: difficulty in playing all your games, with the average number of games played by players in the NBA continuing to fall, and season by season that does seem to be happening. So, what are your thoughts? How do you personally kind of prepare for this silly season at the end of the end of the NBA season? Also, just in general, thinking about your best player is probably only going to play 65 to 70 games. Like, do you factor that into your planning? Do you try and sort of get ahead on games early? Do you do anything else? These seasons do you find yourself like stashing project players on your bench less in order to ensure that you have enough like functional stat producers that you can rotate through your team to make sure that you're keeping your games up? How do you go about this?
You can go first, Nicko.
Well, I had a good run of injuries this year, as I mentioned. So, my plan going into the season was to try and minimise the injuries that you carry. Obvious plan, everyone does that. However, it played out pretty well for me, and I got ahead in games. And then it kind of got to the point where I'm like, okay, well, I had players on my team, and I just stopped playing them and just tried to bleed myself back into it. So I feel like that from a games played point of view, that was a really good strategy. And in the past, it has burnt me before with all the benchings and restings and all the bullshit that goes on in the NBA rosters at the moment in the lead up to the playoffs. But that strategy worked well for me. Didn't work over well for my team. I think it's a solid kind of strategy to try and combat that. Pick consistent guys, bank your games early, get it to the point where you're maybe 3-4 games up in every position or every second position, or not really struggling in any. I always try and leave if you're going to be down in games, have it in utils, have it in the guard slot, or have it in the forward slot.
Yeah.
Get the spank the center ones there while they're healthy, because with guys like Miles Turner and a lot of these people who have a history of being fragile, the bigger blokes, if you've got good players in hard positions, just play them every single game. Even if you think, oh, well, maybe they're going to play them less minutes this week, it pays to play them early. So that was my my method. But there's many different kind of strategies you can take based on the roster that you've put together. So that was mine, and it worked in that regard.
Yep. Shan? I'll just build on that. I used to, when I say used to, I'm talking when we were playing 5-8 years ago, I used to try to maintain pretty much right on target in each position, playing. So the exact amount of games left is the amount of games I had, but I don't do that anymore. Obviously, with this shift, now I try to keep about 2 games ahead. Just at the bottom of your team page on Yahoo, you scroll down to the bottom and it says how many games you're ahead at each position. Try to keep about 2 ahead. But the other thing that sort of worked out for me in this regard was one of my trades made me deeper about the second half of the year, and that's not normally how I roll. I usually roll with a stars and scrubs sort of lineup where I'm then churning through the free agents, and it means I'm a bit of a shallow team, but I was able to get it so that now, I mean, in the last month, it hasn't mattered whether I've had to play my bench guys because of that depth. So I reckon that sort of approach, going for a slightly deeper team going forward, is going to be beneficial.
Yep. How do you think this kind of thing impacts on choices about picking up somebody that is injury prone? For instance, Kawhi Leonard. If you're going to be playing a guy that is likely to only be playing maybe half the games for the season, like a 40-game player, that it makes it more difficult, don't you think, to carry that kind of a player given the current sort of state of the NBA?
Definitely.
Yeah, but at the same time, he's no longer, you're not comparing a Kawhi Leonard who plays, let's say, when you get Kawhi, you're thinking 58-ish games maybe. That's what you're banking on. You're not comparing that against, most of the guys being 80 games.
True.
So, the counterfactual, they are going down as well. Everyone else, you're comparing it to, most are playing 70 at most. So maybe those risks, I don't know.
You
whether
haven't got John Stockton out there playing 82 games a season every season. It just doesn't happen anymore.
And I find it hard to just not take those risks.
Yeah,
I always think, like, if I draft Kawhi next year, I'll be drafting him and going, it's got to be his year. I just cannot help it.
This is the one, finally. What about situations where, we've only got a certain number of injury IL spots? I can't even remember what it is. Were we on 2 this season, I think? Were we 2 ILs?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
It's 2.
So if you happen to, you've stashed a couple of ILs, and then you get somebody else that's injured. I mean, you can't really afford to stick a third injured guy on your bench anymore, or it's more difficult to do that than it has been in the past. Do you think?
Yeah. Oh, look, I think everyone should have 2 players that are on their IL at all times.
Yeah, just picking them up.
Whether you're like me and you pick up Lonzo Ball and then 2/3 of the way through the season, you're like, he's not getting on.
He's not coming back.
It didn't hurt, because if there was anyone else who came along, look, even Jonathan Isaac, because he had shown promise about 100 years ago when he last played a few games, stuck with him. He came back and he was no good. So, you cut him and move on to the next injured potential. So
rest in peace, Jonathan Isaac. We hardly knew you. All right, cool. So anything else that you want to say? Look, one thing I wanted to mention is this new collective bargaining agreement, 65 game minimum to qualify for awards, end of season awards. Do we think that this is going to have an impact on the amount of games that your average NBA player plays?
I hope it does, Dave. I certainly hope it does. I can see them trying to put more value, because I guess the attitude of players is they like awards, because not everyone can win a championship. And it's going to encourage some of these guys to get in there and play a few more games at the end of the seasons, perhaps when they might be resting. So, look, I'm all for it. I mean, look, at the end of the day, they're all young millionaires who don't have to do anything they don't want to do, right?
Yeah.
But their ego may drive them to do better. So,
makes sense from a league perspective, I think. Like, I think I mean, we're getting to the point where you spend a lot of money to buy an expensive NBA ticket to go and watch your favorite star play, and you've got like what, a 2/3 chance that he's actually going to be suiting up for the game on any given night. I mean, that
Anthony
sucks,
Edwards
right?
was saying that at one stage during the season.
He did say that. I saw that. Yeah.
And that's great. And I can't remember who it was. There was another guy who I'm not a big fan of, NBA player, and the guy went to see him and he wasn't there. And they put him on some Instagram thing, and was it Curry?
No, it was Jimmy Butler, wasn't it?
Yeah, it might have been Jimmy. And then they went and
Jimmy Butler.
Bought him a ticket to the next home game and had him courtside and signed a jersey. So that's another way of making sure that you engage and keep people happy and don't look like a complete asshole.
But ideally, like we would suit the schedule to match the capability of the players to, physically front up to the game.
That's a long season. It is a long season. So yeah,
it's kind of weird to have it as it is. Shan, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's going to have a big impact on fantasy at all, really. Each season, it might mean there are 5, 6 or 7 players who are in contention for some kind of award who might end up therefore playing 2 or 3 more games than they otherwise would have. And even if that's the case, I do wonder whether we'll see some rorting of that. I wonder whether we'll see Joel Embiid play 20 minutes in a couple of games in the last week or that sort of thing. Maybe they don't play the full
10 minutes on the 65th and last game to get the scoring title.
What was that game a couple of years ago where Draymond wanted to be there for a major sort of event for Steph Curry, and he was on the court at the start of the game. They immediately called a timeout and he walked off.
Nice. Just showing up for your teammate.
Stuff. Yeah. Well,
he's a tosser, but I like that move.
It was funny, wasn't it? All right, let's move on. We can get through this rather quickly, I think. Last segment, unless I forgot to ask you, Nicko, have you got your line of the week?
I have got the line of the week.
Let's just do line of the week now. We can't have an episode without line of the week, a pod episode.
I know that this is one that all the real hardcore fans are keen on. So the fantasy line of the week the line of the week goes to Joel Embiid.
Oh God, Jack Chris.
Now Joel the Troll Embiid. I've got him at this is probably one of the last few line of the weeks that he'll get. He's a very strong MVP candidate. Have a look at his games in April. So the scope of this is April.
He cooked the Celtics in that last game. My God.
Oh yeah.
Oof.
Yeah. And such a close game to win by 2 points, and you've got this freak getting 52 points, 13 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 blocks.
Dare I say it? That's an MVP type performance right there.
12 or 13 from the line in a 2-point win. Think about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what it takes to get the MVP. And I love Nikola, and I want him to get it for a 3rd straight year. But I'm not going to cry foul if Joel Embiid gets it this year. So
I think I might be supporting Joel this year.
Donnie Mitchell.
It's such an interesting race.
Yeah, sorry. We can talk about the MVP for a little bit, but
go for it. Let's do it. We've got a huge Jokic advocate here, and Nick is on Jokic is on Nick's team, and a huge Embiid advocate in Shan, who supports the 76ers. So. What are we thinking, guys? What's your best case to support Joel Embiid winning this year, Shan?
Look, my best case is my honest answer, and I think you asked us about this. Might have been 3-4 weeks ago, and I said at that point I could understand if Jokic still got it, and he was probably a bee's dick in front for me. But since that point, Joel's really just been on fuego, and it's not that Jokic hasn't been on fuego. Jokic is always on fire. But I think the scales might be slipping slightly to Embiid, and then I think he's going to have the sentiment, just as in there's a couple of angles to that. The sentiment in terms of there'll be a lot of people who won't want to see Jokic win it for a 3rd time. They'll be like, he hasn't won anything ever. How can he have 3 straight MVPs? So there'll be that sort of angle, and then there'll be the newness of Embiid. So I kind of feel like maybe that's what's going to happen.
I agree, Shan. I reckon it's actually going to go to Embiid for those very reasons.
You're not going to make a case for Jokic?
No. Here it comes.
Okay.
So I think Jokic is the better player. His team's won more games. He's the number one ranked
Same.
fantasy player. Or
And
he's the number one
he's been
ranked
deeper
fantasy
into the
player.
playoffs as well.
Well, I guess we might find out about which team wins. It might come down to the last game for either side, and it may well be the fact that neither of these guys are playing, they're being rested, and their teams decide which one of their champions is going to get the MVP. So, look, that's the narrative, that's the storyline behind the NBA at the moment, and that's why I think Embiid's going to get it. You tell me, who would you rather play with? I'd rather play with Jokic. He would be the best teammate.
That's not fair, though. You'd rather play with Jokic because he'll pass you the bloody ball, and if
That's
Joel's on your
fucking
team,
right.
you have to pass him the ball.
I've been burned by playing with Hunguses. No,
It's
he's
one of
good.
those things. Like Joel is clearly the superior scorer and superior defender,
Yeah,
and just a
Jokic has got
force
the
of
vision.
nature. Jokic has subtlety, and he like there's no other player in the league that makes an offense hum quite like Nikola Jokic. So yeah, I can
Certainly
understand.
made me hum this season.
I like it. All right, let's keep going. You've got
Donovan Mitchell, 3 brilliant games in April over this period. 42, 40, and 43. Shooting well from the line, shooting well from the field. Not a heap of turnovers. He's got more than what you'd like to see. He got a few steals and a couple of blocks over that period, but that looked very, very solid. If it wasn't for the big MVP, he might well have the line of the week. The next one is my honourable mentions. Spicy P there, looking like he's just got a UTI from his spicy P. He's actually really turned it on in these last few games. Look at that. 28 points, 11 rebounds, a couple of steals in every game. He's 22 and 14, 36, mind you, and another 7 and 7. So look, the dude's carrying a lot of weight. I really like his stuff, but he's just not. He's like tier 2 for this period. The big dog here has also got, what was it, 16 rebounds? Yeah. Mitch, he's got 16 rebounds, 7 blocks on an individual game. If he had just made a few more of those things, so what he shoot 6 of 13 from the field. Say he gets, 8 or 9 or 13, he's up at around 20 something points. That may well be the actual individual game. I mean, of this period.
You just love him to be the modern day Marcus Camby, wouldn't you? But he's just not consistent enough with it, Like he's got that potential to rack up the blocks and the rebounds, but
yeah.
Interesting stat in that line is the minutes played. Often when you're looking at these line of the week sort of games, it's like, well, they've played a lot 40. Of minutes, but he's only played 30.
Yeah, that's him in a nutshell, isn't it? Because he often can't control his foul rate, and he's got five fouls
5. Yeah, and good guy Jimmy Butler there too, with 2 pretty solid games there. He's Jimmy. Well and truly up there in the conversation for the line of the week as well. So look, between those 3, I probably like Mitch's game as an individual game, but overall I think Spicy P is probably the best of those 3. But yeah, give it to Donovan Mitchell and Joel on the previous slide.
Nice, I like it. Nice one. So we'll just whip through some like a mini waiver wire pickup segment to close out in the chaos of the season close. Is there anybody that either of you have noticed taking advantage of the extra opportunities to post big numbers? I've got a couple here, but I'll let you guys go first.
Well, I just want to put this out there that given the rapid decline of my team through the ranks, I've probably been a little bit of a sleeper on the on some of these guys, so I haven't really paid too much attention to it. It's really, really hard for me to kind of see who I'm actually going to get that's going to do anything. I get sucked into the big names at this period because when you're so far behind, you need someone coming back or someone who, yeah. Gotcha. And I'm not going to look at this and go, oh well, geez, Harrison Barnes is going to really fire up my season and pull me back from the depths.
Well, I've got 3 guys. Let me throw them up. So Quentin Grimes, over the last fortnight, on averages, he's ranked 4th in the NBA.
I think Law's got him, yeah.
No, maybe possibly. I know that the next 2 I think are Dave G as the next 2. So Quentin Grimes averaging like 27 points a game or something crazy over about a span of about 5 to 8 games, something like that. Trey Murphy, the third. See, I feel like I've mentioned Trey Murphy more on this podcast than any other player, but he's ranked 11th in the NBA over the last 2 weeks. Now this is the kind of stuff that for all our listeners out there, if you haven't been switched on enough to pick any of these guys up at this time, it's worth paying attention to this stuff anyway, because this could be an indicator that they're ready to break out next season. With extra opportunity and extra minutes, they can post volume stats. So somebody like a Trey Murphy, perhaps he gets the opportunity next year with the Pelicans. And then Emmanuel Quickly at ranked 12th in the league in fantasy over the last fortnight. So all of these guys posting more than 20 points a game and, doing their thing.
So my response to this is in the last fortnight, you do not treat it the same as the rest of the season where you're thinking who's going to be the best from here on out. You've got to treat it more like daily fantasy, where, there are sites dedicated to that where they say, today pick up this guy, because it's all about who's going to be rested. So in that vein, look at teams like Washington, who are just benching everyone. Cleveland have just announced in the next game they're going to bench everyone. So in terms of Washington, I'd probably look at a guy like Dan Gafford. There'll be no Porzingis, there'll be no Kuzma, there'll be no Beal, there'll be no Morris. So Gafford, and another team might be Indiana. Look at Jalen Smith. Yeah, those sort of guys. And TJ McConnell, I don't even know if he's playing, but I think you've got him, haven't you, Dave?
Yeah, he's been pretty good. Yep.
So do that. What I mean is you don't plan these things in advance. It's just one day, pick up a player for that game.
Yeah, gotcha.
There's another guy who I was going to mention, but I can't pronounce his name. Do you want me to give it a crack? Yeah.
Svi. Yep.
Yeah, Svi looks pretty solid. If you needed another guy, he's probably going to be available in most leagues. I'm not sure what his roster is, but old Svi's pretty trusty.
Nick, is Svi black or white?
Yeah, no, he's white. Is he?
He is, yes. Very well done.
Lucky.
I mean, no, I would be just as happy if he was black.
I'm going to keep that in. I'm going to keep that in the podcast. I'm going to take it out of context and post all sorts of memes around it as well. All right, nice.
Yeah, cool.
All right, guys, I reckon that'll do us. Any other thoughts before we close out?
Go the Lions.
Go the Lions, indeed.
I reckon old Crispy's in for a couple of weeks on the sidelines, going to end that long playing streak, unfortunately for my team.
True. Yeah, me versus you this week, Nick. You feeling confident? You should. I'm planning to finish last this season.
Yeah, Dave's tanking for Wembanyama in the AFL draft. So
It's for those listening, it's a dynasty league. So I'm loading up on picks at the moment. All right.
Solid foundation.
Solid foundation. All right, thanks guys, and for everybody out there, we will see you next week.
See you guys.
Or the week after, something like that.
Yeah.